"This ain't your place anymore." My daughter-in-law's casual cruelty landed like a physical blow, each word a hammer against the foundations of my life. 62 years of memories, the echoes of my late husband's laughter, suddenly felt like trespasses in the home we built together. My breath hitched, the familiar scent of roses from the garden turning acrid with disbelief. Had my own son's wife just declared me an unwelcome guest in my own home? A silent scream clawed its way up my throat. Little did she know, her callous pronouncement had just ignited a quiet fire within me, a resolve she couldn't possibly fathom. What happened next? Let me tell you. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Shannon. For 62 years, this world has been my stage. And for a good chunk of that time, this house, nestled in a quiet corner of Denver, Colorado, has been my sanctuary. Every nook and cranny holds a story, whispers of laughter and love, especially the kitchen. This kitchen, it still smells faintly of Arthur's pipe tobacco and the Sunday morning pancakes he used to flip with such enthusiasm. Arthur, my husband, my rock, gone 6 months now. Cancer, that relentless thief, snatched him away too soon, leaving a void that echoes through these rooms. To help me navigate this new, silent chapter, our son Daniel and his wife Briar moved in. Their intentions, at least initially, seemed kind. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in this big place," Daniel had said, his arm around my shoulder at the funeral. Briar had offered a tight-lipped hug and a hesitant, "We're here for you, Shannon." Life settled into a new rhythm, a slower, quieter beat. Daniel went to work, Briar worked remotely from the spare bedroom, and I tried to find my footing again amidst the familiar comfort of our home. I'd spend my mornings tending to Arthur's rose bushes in the garden, their vibrant blooms a stark contrast to the dull ache in my heart. The evenings were the hardest, the silence amplifying his absence. One such morning, I was in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I was gently wiping down Arthur's favorite coffee mug, the chipped blue one he insisted on using every single day. It felt almost like holding a piece of him. The warmth of the ceramic, a faint echo of his hand. The quiet clinking of the mug against the drying rack was the only sound in the room. Then Briar walked in. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, a small, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. She was dressed in her usual yoga pants and one of Daniel's old college t-shirts, her posture radiating a casual, almost arrogant confidence. Her words, when they came, were like a sudden gust of icy wind, chilling me to the bone. She looked me straight in the eye, that little smirk never leaving her face, and said it as if she were stating the most obvious, unremarkable fact. "This isn't your home anymore, Shannon." The mug slipped slightly in my hand, the ceramic cold against my suddenly clammy skin. For a split second, the world tilted on its axis, and I couldn't draw breath. My chest tightened, a vice squeezing the air from my lungs. The gentle hum of the refrigerator behind me seemed to grow louder, almost accusatory. My ears started to ring. A strange metallic taste flooded my mouth, sharp and unwelcome, like the taste of betrayal. Briar didn't flinch. She just stood there, framed by the doorway, watching me as if I were an old piece of furniture she'd finally decided to discard. Something gathering dust and taking up space. Her gaze held a strange mix of impatience and a subtle, almost pitying condescension. I said nothing, not because I was speechless, though a part of me was reeling, trying to process the sheer audacity of her statement. No, I remained silent because in that instant, a flicker of something else ignited within me, a quiet understanding of something she clearly didn't know, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Briar, in her self-assuredness, had just made a grave error. She had underestimated the quiet strength of a woman who had built a life within these walls. A woman whose roots ran deep within this very foundation. The game, I realized with a sudden clarity, was far from over. But before we fast forward to the phone calls Briar would later make, her voice laced with a desperation she hadn't shown in that kitchen doorway, or the day I walked through these rooms one last time, the weight of the house keys heavy in my palm. Let me take you back. Let me paint you a picture of the life Arthur and I built within these walls, brick by loving brick. We weren't wealthy when we bought this place. It was a fixer-upper, a little rough around the edges, much like we were in our early 20s, full of dreams and a healthy dose of naivete. I remember the day we got the keys, the smell of damp plaster and old wood hitting us as we stepped inside. Arthur, ever the optimist, threw his arm around me and declared, "It's ours, Shan. Just imagine the life we'll have here." And we did. We poured our sweat and our savings into making it our own. I spent hours sanding down the old window frames, the fine dust coating everything, while Arthur, with his perpetually rolled-up sleeves, tackled the leaky faucet in the bathroom. The scent of sawdust became the perfume of our early marriage, mingling with the aroma of my less-than-perfect attempts at cooking. The backyard, now a riot of colorful blooms, was just a patch of uneven grass back then. I have a vivid memory of Arthur, his brow furrowed in concentration, digging the hole for the maple tree we planted to commemorate our first anniversary. His hand, calloused from work, felt strong and sure in mine as we patted the soil around the sapling. That tree grew alongside our love, its branches reaching towards the sky, witnessing our journey. Then came Daniel, our only child, filling the house with the joyful chaos that only a little one can create. I remember the day he took his first wobbly steps on the living room carpet, his tiny hands reaching out to Arthur and me, his triumphant giggle echoing through the house. Birthday parties were a yearly ritual, the backyard transformed into a wonderland of balloons and laughter, the scent of barbecue filling the air. Arthur, with his booming laugh, would always be the first to smear cake on Daniel's nose, and later, the scraped knees from learning to ride his first bike on the driveway. Arthur patiently running alongside, his hand steadying the handlebars. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the backdrop to our most cherished memories. Life wasn't always easy, of course. There were storms we weathered, disagreements and worries that cast shadows. But this house was always our anchor, the place we returned to, the place where we found solace and each other. The shadow of illness fell upon us slowly at first, a subtle dimming of Arthur's vibrant energy. Then the diagnosis, delivered with a clinical detachment that felt so cruel. The house became a different kind of sanctuary then, a place where I cared for him, where we held on to each other even tighter as the days grew shorter. The scent of antiseptic replaced the sawdust, the quiet hum of the oxygen tank, a constant presence. His passing left a silence in the house that was deafening. Every corner held his absence, every object a painful reminder. The house felt too big, too empty. That's when Daniel and Briar offered to move in. "Just until you find your footing again, Mom," Daniel had said, his hug tight and filled with a grief I knew mirrored my own. Briar had echoed his sentiment, though her eyes held a guarded quality I didn't quite understand then. Initially, I was grateful. Their presence filled the silence, and it felt like a return to some semblance of family life. Briar would sometimes bring me a cup of coffee in the morning, though she never quite met my eyes. She helped me sort through Arthur's clothes, her touch surprisingly gentle, as she folded his favorite sweater. She even started calling me Shannon, a small gesture that felt both comforting and a little forced. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. It wasn't a dramatic clash, no raised voices or sudden arguments. It was more subtle, like a draft creeping in under the door on a cold day. You don't notice it until you feel the chill in your bones. Briar started rearranging things. My collection of antique silver spoons, carefully displayed in the dining room, vanished and reappeared tucked away in a drawer. The hand-knitted throw blanket Arthur's mother had made, always draped over the back of the sofa, was folded neatly in a linen closet, replaced by a modern, geometric patterned one. One evening, I was looking for a specific photograph, a candid shot of Arthur laughing on our anniversary trip to the mountains. I searched the mantelpiece, the bookshelves, the photo albums. It was nowhere to be found. When I finally asked Briar about it, she shrugged casually. "Oh, I think I put some of the older photos in a box in the attic. We needed more space for some of our things." A small prickle of unease ran down my spine. It wasn't just about the photo. It was the casual dismissal, the implication that my memories, our history, were now considered older, something to be tucked away and forgotten. A sense of foreboding settled in, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind that this living arrangement, initially offered with such apparent kindness, might be heading down a path I hadn't foreseen. The changes kept coming, each one small on its own, almost insignificant, but together they formed a pattern, a slow and steady erasure of my presence in my own home. My antique teacups, the delicate porcelain I had inherited from my grandmother and proudly displayed in the glass cabinet in the dining room, vanished one day. I found them later, wrapped in old newspaper and tucked away in a dusty box in the basement. Briar explaining that they were too fragile and didn't really go with the decor. Then there were the curtains. I had hand-stitched those floral drapes years ago, choosing the fabric with Arthur, remembering the way the sunlight filtered through them in the mornings. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find them gone, replaced by stark, modern blinds that let in harsh, unflattering light. Briar thought these would look cleaner, Mom, Daniel had mumbled, avoiding my gaze. I didn't argue. What was the point? It was just curtains, I told myself. But it wasn't just the big things. It was the little things too. The subtle shifts that chipped away at my sense of belonging. Arthur's favorite armchair, a worn leather recliner that sat in the living room corner and held the imprint of his body, was suddenly deemed too bulky and relegated to the garage. My old wooden recipe box, filled with handwritten cards passed down through generations, disappeared from the kitchen counter and ended up tucked away in a drawer, replaced by a sleek digital tablet. Even the family photos that lined the mantelpiece, capturing decades of our life together, started to disappear. Slowly, one by one, they were replaced with pictures of Briar's family, snapshots from their vacations and celebrations. It felt like my history, our history, was being quietly phased out, like I was becoming a faded photograph myself. Daniel, my own son, started to drift away. Our conversations became shorter, less personal. He seemed preoccupied, always on his phone or wrapped up in conversations with Briar. He used to stop by my room in the evenings to chat about his day, to ask how I was doing. Those visits dwindled, replaced by a quick nod or a mumbled, "Good night, Mom," as he passed by. He started deferring to Briar on everything, even things that used to be our shared decisions. If I suggested a movie night, he'd glance at Briar for her approval. If I offered to cook his favorite meal, he'd say, "Briar already has something planned." It felt like there was an invisible wall between us, Briar standing firmly on the other side. I tried to talk to him once, to gently voice my feelings of being out of place. He'd just pat my hand and say, "You're overthinking things, Mom. Briar's just trying to make the house feel like home for all of us." His words, though meant to reassure, felt hollow. This was my home. It had been for over 30 years. One afternoon, the absence of a particular photograph hit me hard. It was a silly picture, taken at a carnival years ago. Arthur had won a ridiculously large stuffed animal, and we were both laughing, our faces flushed with happiness. It used to sit on my bedside table. I searched everywhere for it. My dresser, the drawers, the boxes in the attic where the older photos had been relegated. It was gone, vanished without a trace. I asked Briar if she had seen it. She was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Maybe I saw it somewhere. I might have put it away with the other old ones. Her casual dismissal felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just a photograph. It was a tangible piece of my past, a moment of pure joy with the man I loved. And it was gone. Deemed insignificant, cluttered to be tidied away. That night, I lay in bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The familiar creaks and groans of the old house seemed to whisper accusations. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the moonlight, and a cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just about sharing a home. It felt like something more insidious was at play. A slow and deliberate attempt to, what? Erase me. The thought was unsettling, but it lingered, a dark cloud on the horizon of my already grieving heart. The feeling of being a stranger in my own home intensified with each passing week. Then came the Saturday brunch. Briar had announced her plans a few days prior, a casual get-together with some of her girlfriends. The house was filled with the buzz of preparation, the aroma of baking, and fresh flowers wafting from the kitchen. Wanting to be a good hostess, and frankly, feeling a little left out of the flurry of activity, I offered to help. Is there anything I can do, Briar? Maybe I could make my blueberry scones. Your friends always seem to enjoy them. I tried to keep my tone light, hoping to bridge the growing distance between us. Briar, arranging a vase of vibrant sunflowers on the kitchen island, gave me a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, that's sweet of you, Shannon, but it's really just a girl's thing. We've got it covered. Why don't you just relax upstairs, enjoy a good book? Her dismissal, though delivered with a veneer of politeness, stung. It wasn't just about the scones. It was about being excluded, being made to feel like my presence might somehow dampen their girl's thing. I forced a smile in return, a hollow gesture that felt foreign on my face. Of course, I said quietly, and retreated to my bedroom. The silence there, a stark contrast to the cheerful sounds drifting up from downstairs. I felt like a respectful ghost, banished to the upper floor. A couple of hours later, a dry throat and a yearning for a cup of my usual afternoon tea drew me downstairs. I moved quietly, my bare feet padding softly on the wooden steps, not wanting to intrude. The French doors leading to the backyard were wide open, and the sounds of laughter and chatter drifted in on the gentle breeze. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping. I simply paused at the edge of the living room, intending to slip into the kitchen unnoticed. But then, Briar's voice, clear and carrying, snagged my attention. She still acts like she runs the place. You know, there was a hint of exasperation in her tone, a casual annoyance, as if she were talking about a bothersome child. Like yesterday, she told me I wasn't folding the towels correctly. Honestly, it's like living with a teenager again. A ripple of laughter followed her remark. Then, another voice, one I didn't recognize, chimed in. Well, technically, isn't it still her house? Briar scoffed, a short, dismissive sound. Please, she lives here because we let her. Honestly, I don't think she'd last a week on her own. Then came the words that truly cut, delivered with a casual cruelty that belied their impact. It was another of her friends who spoke, her tone light, almost teasing. Oh, come on, Briar, be nice. She's, older. That generation just clings to things. A wave of laughter erupted, louder this time. It wasn't malicious laughter, not overtly cruel in tone. It was the casual kind of cruelty, the sort of remark people toss off without a second thought, the kind served with sips of champagne and cucumber sandwiches. I stood frozen just behind the corner, one hand gripping the cool plaster of the wall for balance. My breath hitched in my throat. In that moment, I wasn't angry. That came later, a slow burn that would simmer beneath the surface. Right then, I just felt small, insignificant, like a piece of old wallpaper, something people forget is even there until it starts to peel and become an eyesore. I quietly turned and walked back upstairs, the sudden urge for tea completely gone. I sat on the edge of my bed, the cheerful sounds of the brunch, a muffled hum from below, and stared at my hands. My skin looked older in the afternoon light, the lines around my knuckles more pronounced, the faint blue veins more visible. I thought about what Briar had said, that I wouldn't last a week on my own. And for one terrible fleeting second, a sliver of doubt crept in. Was she right? Had I become so dependent, so useless? I didn't tell Daniel. What would I say? That I was hiding behind a wall, overhearing how little I mattered to his wife and her friends. That the woman he had promised to love and cherish had turned me into the punchline of their afternoon gathering. The words felt heavy and pathetic even in my own mind. So, I stayed quiet. But that night, after the last of Briar's friends had left, their laughter fading into the evening, and the remnants of the brunch, the half-empty mimosa glasses, the scattered crumbs, lay scattered across the patio, I came downstairs. The dishes were stacked precariously high in the sink. Without a word, I began to clean. I wasn't doing it to please them. I was doing it because I needed something, anything, to anchor me, to remind myself that I could still do something, still had a purpose within these walls, even if they didn't see it. The clinking of the plates, the warm rush of water over my hands, the rhythmic swipe of the sponge. These simple, familiar actions were a small comfort in the swirling storm of my emotions. Briar came into the kitchen, a little tipsy, her cheeks flushed and glowing from the afternoon's festivities. "Oh my God, Shannon," she said, giggling slightly. "You didn't have to clean all this. You're such a sweetheart." She looked at me with a slightly condescending smile, as if I were a child who had done something unexpectedly adorable. Then she turned and called out to Daniel in the next room, her voice loud enough for me to hear over the running water. "She's still doing dishes. I swear, she'll probably be scrubbing the floor on her deathbed." Another burst of laughter from the living room. I stared down at the soapy sponge in my hand, at the water swirling down the drain. Something inside me cracked open, not loudly, not dramatically, but just enough to let a little cold air in, enough to feel the sharp ache of how much I had allowed myself to shrink, to become invisible. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in the darkness, listening to the wind whisper through the trees outside my window, the branches tapping gently against the glass. Arthur's old wind chime, hanging on the porch, clinked softly in the breeze. For the first time since he'd been gone, I wished it would fall, just to prove that something in this house could still make noise when it broke. The next morning, I made coffee, just for myself. No extra cups, no offer of toast. Briar came downstairs, her usual morning cheerfulness, a stark contrast to my quiet mood. "Morning, are you making toast?" she asked brightly. No," I replied, my voice flat. She blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but I simply turned and walked out onto the porch, my mug warm in my hands, and sat in my old rocking chair. The wood creaked gently beneath me, a familiar sound. I wasn't ready to fight yet, but something had shifted within me. The hiding was over. Briar's dismissive words about me not being able to manage on my own kept echoing in my mind. They were meant to belittle, to establish a sense of my dependence on her and Daniel, but instead, they stirred something within me, a long-dormant spark of defiance. A quiet voice inside whispered, "She thinks she knows you, Shannon? She has no idea." My thoughts drifted back to Arthur. He was always a planner, a protector, even in his final months. When his body was failing him, his mind remained sharp, his concern for my well-being unwavering. I remembered countless conversations, hushed tones in the quiet of our bedroom, about my future, about ensuring I would be secure. One conversation, in particular, surfaced from the depths of my memory. It was a sunny afternoon, a few weeks before his diagnosis became truly grim. Arthur was sitting in his favorite armchair by the window, a stack of papers on the small table beside him. He had called me over, his eyes serious, but filled with a familiar warmth. "Sean, come here for a moment," he'd said, his voice a little weaker than usual. He gestured to the documents. "I want to make sure you understand a few things." He had explained some financial matters, things I usually left entirely to him. Then he picked up a specific document, a legal-looking paper with official seals. "This," he'd said, tapping it gently with his finger, "this is the deed to the house. It's solely in your name, Sean. Always has been." I remember being a little surprised. But I thought we bought it together. He had smiled, a small reassuring smile. We did, my love. But years ago, when we refinanced, I made sure it was just you on the title. For your protection, Shan. You never know what life might throw our way. He had continued, his gaze steady. Promise me something, Shan. Promise me you'll always look out for yourself. You've always been so giving, so ready to put others first. But this house, this is yours. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. He had even added, a hint of a knowing look in his eyes. And you know our Daniel, he means well. But Briar, well, she has her own way of seeing things. Just be careful, Shan. This house is your safety net, your anchor. At the time, I hadn't fully grasped the weight of his words, the subtle warning in his tone. I had simply nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness, his ever-present concern for me. Now, sitting in my rocking chair on the porch, the memory of that conversation felt like a lifeline. Arthur had foreseen something, perhaps not the specifics of Briar's behavior, but a potential vulnerability in my nature, my tendency to give way, to avoid conflict. He had armed me with a truth I had almost forgotten. This house, the place Briar so casually dismissed as not truly mine, was legally and unequivocally mine. And then I remembered something else. Arthur had mentioned keeping important documents, including the updated deed, in our safe deposit box at the First National Bank downtown. Just for safekeeping, Shan, he'd said. You know where the key is. The key. It was tucked away in a small velvet-lined box in my jewelry drawer, nestled amongst my favorite necklaces. A sudden sense of clarity washed over me, a feeling that had been clouded by grief and confusion. I wasn't powerless. I had a piece of information, a piece of paper that held more weight than Briar's dismissive pronouncements. A quiet determination began to bloom within me, pushing back the despair that had taken root. The idea of simply accepting Briar's assertion, of fading away in my own home, became unthinkable. Arthur had entrusted me with this sanctuary, and I wouldn't let anyone, not even his son's wife, take it away from me. The seed of a plan, a way to take back control, began to sprout in my mind. It was still vague, a whisper of an idea, but it was there, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Briar thought she had the upper hand, that I was just a grieving old woman clinging to the past. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. The memory of Arthur's words, coupled with the knowledge of the deed, gave me a newfound sense of purpose. I realized I couldn't confront Briar directly. Her dismissive attitude and Daniel's apparent blindness to her behavior would likely lead to nothing but arguments and further emotional distress. Instead, I decided to gather information, to arm myself with knowledge before making any moves. I started subtly. Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention to the real estate section of the local newspaper. I'd casually mentioned to Daniel, during our brief and often strained conversations, that a neighbor down the street had put their house on the market. Seems like a nice little place, I'd comment, observing his reaction. He usually just grunted in response, more interested in his phone. I even feigned a passing interest in downsizing. You know, I said to Briar one afternoon, while she was scrolling through online shopping sites on the living room sofa, this house is quite big for just one person. Now that Arthur's gone, maybe I should start thinking about something smaller, easier to manage. Briar's ears perked up at that. A flicker of something, was it relief? Crossed her face. Oh, that's a good idea, Shannon, she said, a little too quickly. Less upkeep and all. She even started showing me listings she found online, mostly modern, minimalist apartments that felt cold and impersonal. It was clear she liked the idea of me moving out, sooner rather than later. This only solidified my resolve. She saw my vulnerability as an opportunity, and that fueled my quiet determination. The time had come to retrieve the deed. One Tuesday morning, after Daniel and Briar had left for their respective work days, I got dressed in my best outfit, The one Arthur always said made me look like $1,000,000. It felt good to put it on. A small act of reclaiming a part of myself I had let dim. The First National Bank downtown held so many memories. Arthur and I had opened our first joint account there, taken out the mortgage for this house, and even deposited Daniel's first savings bonds. Walking through the familiar doors, the scent of old paper and polished wood, the hushed atmosphere, all brought a wave of nostalgia. I approached the teller, a kind-faced woman with warm eyes and a friendly smile. She looked vaguely familiar. Then I remembered Mrs. Henderson, who had always helped Arthur with his business accounts. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice a little shaky but holding steady. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. Shannon Davies. It's been a while. How are you holding up?" Her voice was gentle, filled with genuine sympathy. "I'm managing," I replied, offering a small, polite smile. "I need to access our safe deposit box. Number 122." A flicker of understanding crossed her face. She remembered Arthur. She guided me through the process, her movements efficient and respectful. Soon, I was signing the logbook and being led to the quiet, secure room where the safe deposit boxes were kept. The small metal box felt heavy in my hands. The click, as I turned the key, echoed in the silent room. Inside, nestled amongst some old insurance papers and Arthur's military discharge certificate, was a manila envelope. My name was typed on the front in Arthur's familiar, precise font. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was the deed to our house. I unfolded it carefully, my eyes scanning the legal jargon, until I found the crucial part. Sole owner, Shannon Marie Davies. There it was, in black and white. Arthur had done exactly as he said. The house was legally mine, and mine alone. A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought me to my knees. It was validation, a tangible proof of Arthur's foresight, his love, his unwavering support. He had known me better than I had known myself in recent months. He had anticipated my vulnerability and quietly secured my future. A surge of inner strength coursed through me. The helplessness I had been feeling began to recede, replaced by a quiet but firm resolve. Briar's words, her attempts to make me feel like an unwelcome guest, suddenly lost their power. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know the secret I now held in my hands. I carefully folded the deed and placed it back in the envelope, tucking it securely into my purse. As I walked out of the bank, the sunlight seemed a little brighter, the air a little fresher. A small, almost mischievous smile played on my lips. Briar thought she was so clever, so in control. She was about to learn that underestimating a quiet, grieving widow could be a very costly mistake. The game, I realized, had just begun. And this time, I was holding all the cards. Armed with the knowledge of the deed, I started making quiet preparations. I knew I had to be discreet. Any hint of my intentions would likely be met with resistance, perhaps even an attempt to manipulate or guilt-trip me. So, I moved with a deliberate slowness, like a chess player carefully planning their next move. I thought about who I could trust, someone who would understand my situation and handle things with sensitivity. My friend, Olivia, came to mind. We had known each other for years, since our sons were in elementary school together. Olivia had become a successful real estate agent after her own children had grown, and I knew she was both professional and trustworthy. I called her one afternoon, keeping my tone casual. "Olivia, dear, do you have a moment? I was thinking I might be considering selling the house, just exploring options, you know." Olivia, ever perceptive, picked up on the slight hesitation in my voice. "Shannon, are you all right? What's going on?" I confided in her, not all the details, but enough for her to understand that the living situation wasn't working for me. I emphasized my need for discretion. Olivia, bless her heart, listened with empathy and assured me she would handle everything privately. Over the next few weeks, Olivia came by the house when Daniel and Briar were at work. We walked through the rooms, her experienced eye assessing the value and potential. It was strange. looking at the house through the eyes of a stranger, seeing it not just as a repository of memories, but as a property. As Olivia worked on the initial paperwork, I started the process of decluttering. This wasn't the sad, reluctant sorting I had done after Arthur's passing. This was different. This was purposeful. I went through each room, deciding what I wanted to take with me to my new beginning, and what I was ready to let go of. Every object held a memory, a whisper of the past. Arthur's collection of old jazz records, Daniel's childhood drawings taped to the refrigerator, the Afghan I had knitted while sitting beside Arthur during his chemotherapy treatments. Each item was a thread in the tapestry of my life here. But as I carefully packed some things away and decided to donate others, there was a sense of release, a feeling of shedding a skin that no longer quite fit. I was honoring the past, but I was also stepping toward the future. Meanwhile, Briar's behavior remained consistent. She continued to make subtle changes to the house, her pronouncements about redecorating becoming more frequent and assertive. "We should really paint the living room a more neutral color, Shannon," she'd say, completely disregarding the fact that Arthur and I had chosen the warm, inviting shade of cream together. She even started talking about replacing the antique dining room table with a sleek, modern one. Daniel, caught in the middle, or perhaps simply choosing to avoid any conflict, remained largely oblivious to the undercurrents. He seemed content to let Briar take the lead, his interactions with me polite but distant. There was one afternoon that felt like a near miss. Olivia had brought over some preliminary listing photos to show me. I had them spread out on the dining room table when I heard Briar's car pull into the driveway, unexpectedly early. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly gathered the photos, my hands shaking slightly, and shoved them into a magazine just as Briar walked in. "Oh, hey, Shannon," she said, glancing around the room. "Just had a quick meeting that finished early. What are you doing?" "Just reading," I said, my voice a little too high. I clutched the magazine a little too tightly. Briar's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of suspicion in her gaze. She looked at the thick magazine in my hands. "That looks interesting." I forced a casual laugh. "Just a new book club read." Thankfully, she didn't press further and went upstairs. That close call served as a stark reminder of the need for absolute secrecy. Finally, the day came when everything was ready. Olivia had found a lovely little cottage for me, just a short drive away, with a small garden that reminded me of the one Arthur and I had started. The paperwork was signed, the closing date set, under the cover of an early morning fog, before Daniel and Briar were even awake. Olivia and her team quietly placed a discreet "for sale" sign in the front yard. It wasn't one of those big, flashy signs, just a simple, elegant one that blended in with the landscaping. It was a silent declaration of my intentions, a turning of the page that Daniel and Briar wouldn't see until it was far too late. The wheels were in motion, and I was finally, quietly, taking back control of my life. The offer came quickly, a solid one from a young family just starting out, their excitement echoing the dreams Arthur and I had held when we first bought this place. Signing the final papers, with Olivia's reassuring presence beside me, brought a quiet wave of satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge or malice. It was about reclaiming my agency, securing my future on my own terms, just as Arthur had intended. The day came to tell Daniel and Briar. I waited until after dinner, after the clatter of dishes had subsided and a fragile semblance of peace had settled over the living room. Daniel was engrossed in a sports program on television, and Briar was scrolling through her phone. I took a deep breath, the weight of the deed in my purse a tangible source of strength. "Daniel, Briar," I began, my voice calm but firm. "There's something I need to tell you." Both of them looked up, a flicker of mild curiosity on their faces. "I've sold the house," I stated simply, watching their expressions shift from indifference to disbelief. Daniel's eyes widened, his gaze snapping away from the television. What? You sold the house, Mom?" Briar's phone slipped from her grasp, landing with a soft thud on the carpet. "What are you talking about, Shannon? You can't just sell the house." Her voice was sharp, laced with an incredulity that quickly morphed into anger. "But I did," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "The closing is next month. I'll be moving then." Briar's true colors began to surface, the veneer of polite tolerance cracking under the pressure of this unexpected news. "This is unbelievable. How could you do this? This is our home now, too. Where are we supposed to go?" Her voice rose with each word, her face flushed with outrage. The entitlement in her tone was stark, a blatant disregard for the fact that this had always been my home. "Your home," I echoed, a hint of irony in my voice. "Those weren't the words you used in the kitchen a few weeks ago, Briar. If I recall correctly, you made it quite clear that this wasn't my home anymore." The air in the room crackled with tension. Daniel looked from Briar to me, his face a mask of confusion and shock. "Mom, I don't understand. Why would you do this without talking to us?" "Because, Daniel," I said, my voice softening slightly as I looked at my son. I realized that my voice wasn't really being heard in this house anymore. "This is my decision. It's time for me to move on, to start a new chapter." Briar was pacing now, her anger palpable. "But this is so selfish. We moved in here to help you. We've been living here for months. And I appreciated your initial offer, Briar," I said, maintaining my composure. "But things have changed. This arrangement isn't working for me." I didn't elaborate on the subtle ways she had tried to erase my presence, the casual cruelty I had overheard. There was no need. Her current outburst spoke volumes. Daniel finally found his voice, a note of pleading in it. "Mom, please reconsider. We can talk about this. We can make things work." I shook my head gently. "My mind is made up, Daniel. The house is sold." Briar stopped pacing, her eyes blazing. "You can't just kick us out. This is unfair. You're being spiteful." The irony of her accusations, after her own dismissive words, was almost comical. "Spiteful," I repeated calmly. "I'm simply taking control of my own life, Briar. Something you seem to think I was incapable of doing." The realization of the finality of the situation began to dawn on Briar. The house, the place she had so readily claimed as "not mine," was gone. Her control, her subtle takeover, had been thwarted by a decision she hadn't seen coming. The shock on her face was almost priceless. A small, quiet sense of triumph bloomed within me. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about reclaiming myself. Daniel looked lost, caught between his wife's fury and his mother's quiet resolve. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Briar, however, was far from silent. Her accusations continued, a torrent of anger and disbelief. But I had already checked out of the argument. Her words no longer held the power to wound me. I had made my decision, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace amidst the storm. The too late moment had arrived, not for me, but for Briar. The day I moved out was a strange mix of emotions. Leaving the house, the place that held 30 years of my life with Arthur, felt like tearing a page from my history. Every room held echoes, Arthur's laughter in the living room, Daniel's small handprint still faintly visible on a kitchen cupboard, the scent of roses that always seemed to linger in the air, especially in the summer. There were tears, quiet ones, as I walked through each room one last time, touching the walls, the windowsills, saying a silent goodbye to the memories etched within. But there was also a sense of anticipation, a lightness I hadn't felt in months. The boxes stacked in the hallway weren't just filled with belongings. They held the promise of a new beginning, a chance to create a space that was entirely my own. Olivia was a rock throughout the move, handling all the logistics with her usual efficiency and offering quiet words of encouragement. My new home was a charming little cottage with a small sunny garden in the back. It was smaller, easier to manage, just as I had told Briar I was considering. But unlike the cold modern spaces she had shown me online, this cottage had character, warmth. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the hardwood floors and the cozy fireplace in the living room. Unpacking felt like an act of reclaiming myself. I carefully arranged Arthur's photographs on the mantelpiece, placing his favorite blue coffee mug on the kitchen counter. My antique teacups finally came out of their dusty box in the basement and found a place of honor in a glass cabinet in the dining nook. Arthur's worn leather armchair fit perfectly in a sunny corner of the living room, beckoning me to sit and remember. Slowly, the cottage started to feel like home. I spent hours in the garden, tending to the small rose bushes I had planted, their vibrant colors a welcome sight. I cooked my favorite meals in the cozy kitchen, the aromas filling the air without the underlying tension I had felt in the old house. I read in Arthur's armchair, his old jazz records playing softly in the background, the music a comforting presence rather than a painful reminder. Looking back at the events that had transpired, there was a sadness, a lingering ache for the way things had unfolded with Daniel and Briar. Their behavior had revealed a side of them I hadn't fully seen, a sense of entitlement and a lack of respect that had been deeply hurtful. But amidst the pain, there was also a profound sense of strength that had blossomed within me. I had faced a difficult situation, made a tough decision, and taken control of my own life. I had honored Arthur's wishes and protected myself. Now, standing in my sunny living room, looking out at my vibrant garden, a sense of peace settled over me. The silence in this house was different. It wasn't the heavy silence of absence, but the quiet contentment of solitude, of being surrounded by things I loved, in a space that was truly mine. The future stretched before me, uncertain, but filled with possibility. I was no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the author of my own next chapter, and that's my story. It's a reminder that even in the face of loss and unexpected challenges, we women possess an inner strength that can surprise even ourselves. Our homes are often more than just places. They are extensions of ourselves, filled with memories and a sense of belonging. And when that sense of belonging is threatened, it's vital to remember our worth and to protect what is rightfully ours. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a time when your own space or voice felt like it was being slowly eroded? What are some ways you believe women in their later years can reclaim their power and independence? And what does it truly mean to protect yourself, even within the complexities of family relationships? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. If you found this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might find comfort or inspiration in it. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel for more stories of resilience, love, and the strength of the human spirit. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story leaves you with a sense of hope and the courage to always honor your own worth. Until next time, take care.